Hey guys, and welcome back to my channel. Today for you guys, I am going to be recreating a Reformation dress that I absolutely fell in love with, but was over $100. So I'm going to be transforming this dress that I got from the thrift store into my dream dress. So I first started out and I literally just eyeballed where I wanted the skirt and the crop top to begin with some chalk, and then I needed to take out the zipper from the back of the dress. So I just started pinning alongside the zipper just to make sure that both layers stayed in place while I was seam ripping the zipper out. And this usually doesn't take as long, but since there were 4 different pieces of fabric I was working with, since there are 2 layers, this took me kind of a long time. So I'm just using my seam ripper and I'm seam ripping along the cloth and the zipper, making sure to detach the lining from the zipper, but also the top layer from the zipper as well. I really wanted to do a really good job at taking the zipper out because zippers are actually really expensive if you buy them from the store. So I'm just going to keep the zipper around and wait for my next project to use it. So then I folded the dress along the bottom chalk mark that I made, and I made a line all across the width of the dress, and this will be where the skirt kind of fits around my waist, and I will be cutting along that white chalk line. So I pinned all across the bottom of that white chalk line just to make sure everything stayed in place, since there are 2 layers in this dress. So now it's off to the chopping block, and basically I am just cutting along that white chalk line, being very careful to keep everything in place because there are 2 layers of this dress. I then set the top piece apart because I wanted to work with the bottom skirt first. The first thing I needed to do was I needed to unpin everything and actually pin around the entire skirt because everything is pinned together right now, and I needed just the 2 layers to be pinned together all the way around the skirt, as you can see here. And then I turned the skirt inside out, but then I remembered that I had 2 layers to work with. This would be a lot easier if you were just working with 1 layer, but basically I had to fold it inside out once again with the lining on the outside because I had to sew where the zipper used to be. And as you can see here, I'm just taking the 2 inner lining purple pieces, putting them together where the zipper used to be, pinning them together, and then sewing them, making sure to do a back stitch at the end of it just to make sure everything stays in place. After cutting the thread, I did the same thing to the outer layer, putting the 2 pieces together where the zipper line used to be, pinning it, and then sewing it, making sure to do a back stitch at the end of it to make sure everything just stayed in place. Next thing I needed to work on was the actual waist part of the skirt. For the waist, I'm going to be putting elastic in it so it's a little bit stretchy, a little bit more comfortable, and that it'll just fit my body a little bit better. So I needed to sew along the top part of the skirt. I am just literally eyeballing this. This is just so the top part of the skirt does not fray after I sew the elastic in it. As you can see here, I'm just sewing along the top part, again, just eyeballing it, and I'm taking out the pins as soon as I kind of get to them, and then I'm re-adding in the pins as soon as I sew that part. Next, I'm just figuring out how much elastic I need for my waist part of my skirt. So I'm just taking some 1-inch elastic that I picked up from Hobby Lobby. It's actually pretty cheap. I think this was like $1.99, and I'm just measuring around my waist, making sure that it fits snugly but not also too tight or too loose, and then I'm measuring it just once again around my waist to make sure everything fits comfortably. So next I need to figure out how much room I need for the elastic, because if you have too much room, then the elastic kind of moves around and can kind of twist in the band. And if there isn't enough room, then the band kind of fits a little bit too snugly and you're not going to be able to get the band in. And as of right now, I'm just kind of eyeballing this once again. I'm not using any sort of measuring tape or measuring device as of yet. I will in just a little bit, but basically I just kind of keep folding and refolding the top part and just seeing how much room I will need to accommodate for the elastic. Once I think that the elastic bit is good and I think the elastic will fit within the band, I will make my official markings, and then I will go actually in with a tape measure and measure from the top part of the skirt down to the first line and then down to the second line, and I will make those markings all along the top of the skirt, all the way around the skirt. this is just the easiest way that I have found to do this, and it has been working well for me. The next step was needing to iron this skirt. You don't have to do this, but I highly recommend it just because it makes sewing the top part of the skirt a little bit easier. So I'm literally just folding over that top stitch line that I made prior. That top stitch line will help keep your ends from fraying. So I'm literally just folding on top of that line and then ironing that all around. After that, I am then just double checking that the elastic is going to fit within the band once I fold it over again to that bottom chalk line. And then along that bottom part, I am just putting in pins all around the skirt just to make sure that it'll stay in place. And where I'm pinning, that is where I will be sewing. So I'm trying to take extra care and make sure I'm extra accurate with where I am pinning because I will be sewing along that line. I decided once again that I wanted to iron the hem. Again, you do not have to do this part, but I just find that it makes the sewing process so much easier. And to make future Eleanor a lot happier, I am just going ahead and I'm ironing around the top skirt part once again, making sure everything is a little bit crisp so it's a lot easier to sew. And this is what it should look like when you're all done with the pinning and ironing of everything. So I just sewed along where I put all of those pins in, and I really took my time with this just because I wanted to be as accurate as possible. And I didn't actually sew all around the waist. I actually left a 1 to 2 inch opening just so I was able to fit the elastic through in the end. So now I need to insert the elastic, and to make this a little bit easier, I clipped on a safety pin to one end of the elastic, and then I threaded it through the 1 inch encasing that I left open. So once again, I did not sew completely around the entire waist. I left a little bit of an opening, and this was actually really hard for me to do because there are 2 layers that I'm working with. So then I just asked my boyfriend if he would help me out, and he of course got it in like a couple of seconds. So now I'm just making sure that the cloth is all the way even with the elastic, making sure that there's just no weird bunching or scrunching in any weird places. And there are 2 ways to sew elastic. You can either put them on top of each other, or you can kind of like sandwich them together as you can see here and sew it along that way. But I decided to go with the first option and sew them right on top of each other just because I feel like there's just a little bit less bulk. So you can see here that I just needed a little bit more elastic to work with so I could sew it. So I pulled a little bit more of the elastic out and I just sewed a crap ton of times over that little bit piece just to make sure it stays in place for a very long time, because there's nothing more annoying than twisted elastic or elastic that comes loose and just like snaps. So after that, I just made sure that there was again no bunching, and I fit the elastic all the way inside, and then I needed to sew along that opening. And then this is what the skirt looked like, or the hem looked like after I was all done sewing it. So then I just turned it right side out, and this is the final project. So the skirt is done. Now onto the top. So for the top, I kind of wanted to do something a little bit unique. I really wanted to have a little bit more of my back showing in this. So I made markings on both layers of where I needed to sew. So now I needed to sew the under layer together and also the top layer together. So I matched up the 2 chalk mark lines that I had previously made, and then I just went along and I pinned along the line that I would be sewing. And then I added in some other pinnings along with it as well, just to make sure that I remembered to stop sewing at those different points. So now I'm starting to sew. I'm doing a back stitch in the beginning of this just to make sure everything stays in place, and then I'm going ahead and I'm sewing along that line, once again taking out the pins as I am sewing. And then I'm doing basically the same thing to the top layer. I am matching up the chalk lines that I had made earlier, and I am pinning along that line, also pinning 2 pins on the top and kind of bottom of that chalk mark just so I can remind myself to stop. I wanted to keep the bottom of this shirt a little bit open and airy and kind of like summery, so I wanted to keep this bottom bit a little bit open. So instead of sewing the 2 bottom layers together, I actually sewed the top layer and the bottom layer together to kind of create this opening so you'd see a little bit of the small of my back when I was wearing it. And once again, I'm starting out with the back stitch before kind of stitching it all together, and then I'm basically doing the same thing with the other side. Now I am starting to begin the bottom hem of the shirt, and once again, kind of like the skirt, I needed to sew around the entire bottom of the shirt just to make sure that the shirt would not fray whenever I washed it. So I lined up the bottom layer along with the top layer and made sure I made an even stitch all across the bottom of the shirt. Then I decided to roll the hem 2 times over to make a nice bottom hemline. Usually this is where I iron, but at this point I was just totally out of it and I just kind of wanted to be done with the shirt part of it. So I skipped the ironing part of it and I just folded it 2 times over and then pinned where I wanted to sew it. Basically kind of just eyeballing everything. In the end, once everything was pinned, I actually did measure it and made sure that the bottom hemline was evenly measured and spaced. Then I went and I sewed around the entire bottom of the hem, making sure that I took out the pins as I kind of got to them. This took me a little bit of time because I wanted to go really slow. Since I didn't iron it, it was a little bit harder to keep everything kind of folded in place. But when I was done, I turned this right side out and I popped this little baby on, and I absolutely love how this Reformation inspired 2-piece set turned out. I'm super excited to continue to wear this throughout the summer and into the fall because they are fall colors. But I think this is such a beautiful 2-piece set, and hey, I saved about 150 bucks by doing this. So thank you guys all so much for watching. It'd mean the world to me if you guys could give me a thumbs up. And also, if you want to join the family, make sure to hit that subscribe button. But I think that is it, you guys. I love you guys all so much. I hope you guys are all doing well, and I will see you in my next video. Bye!